Here we go. Hello, and welcome to the fifth in our series of audio-enabled EDA Step Workshop sessions. We're glad you're here. My name is Annette, and I'm in full recovery from an eating disorder. Before we get started, a few caveats. This session of the EDA Step Workshop is being recorded. We hope to make the audio recordings of this workshop accessible to everyone. Please note that these audios will not be available on the EDA website until they've gone through the full vetting process. We will, however, be sending information about the recordings to the GSB email distribution list. If you're not on the list and you want to be, please drop a line to info@eatingdisordersanonymous.org and we'll get you added. Listening to a recording is not a substitute for attending EDA meetings or working the steps. We encourage you to check out our meetings pages, which include face-to-face, online, and teleconference meetings like this one. Just like what you might find at an EDA group, what you're about to hear reflects experiences and opinions of individual EDA members that may or may not tally with your own experiences. Please take what you can use and leave the rest. You do not need a sponsor to attend this workshop. We'll all be working the steps of EDA together, myself included. As a matter of fact, I just filled out my worksheet this morning. To make things easier for everyone, we have muted everyone as they join. If you'd like to be heard, please unmute your phone by using *6 if you're using a phone, or Alt-A if you're on a computer. You can mute and unmute using the same key combination. Because there's so many of us, we won't all get a chance to introduce ourselves. However, if you are speaking, please do tell us your first name and where you're from. Last week, we discussed Step 2, and most of us took the step. If you're feeling a little lost or behind, please don't worry. You can be sure you're not alone. Please hang in there. Tonight we'll talk about Appendix B, A Perspective on Balance, and Step 3, pages 124 through 131. After the overview, we'll move right into questions from last week and any new ones that have come up during the Step 3 discussion. If you have questions related to Step 3, please type them in the chat window of Zoom or email them to info@eatingdisordersanonymous.org, and we'll be doing our best to get those addressed. Before we get started, I'd like to check to see who's available on the call who would be willing to answer questions from sponsees or for people on the call. If you're a sponsor in EDA, not that you're necessarily offering to take on additional sponsees, would you please identify yourself now so that we can know whom to call upon when we have our panel of questions?
Yes, this is Nuria, recovered from an eating disorder from Charleston, South Carolina.
Hi, this is Leslie, recovered from an eating disorder in New York City.
Sorry, Leslie, didn't mean to step on you there. This is Stacey, recovered from an eating disorder in Pensacola, Florida.
Hi, this is Diana, and I'm in Lubbock, Texas, and I'm fully recovered from an eating disorder.
Hi, my name is Lana. I'm from Tucson, Arizona, and I'm recovering from an eating disorder.
This is Cale. I am in recovery from an eating disorder, and I live in Phoenix, Arizona.
Hi, this is Michelle.
Go for it. This is Gisele in full recovery from Maricopa, Arizona.
Hi, this is Michelle. I'm in full recovery from an eating disorder, and I'm from Covington, Louisiana.
Hi, this is Ange. I am recovering from an eating disorder, and I'm from Nanaimo, BC, Canada.
That's so fantastic. Thank you all for joining and for helping those out who are looking for recovery from an eating disorder. Wonderful to have you all join us. So with that, we'd like to get started on our reflections for tonight. I've asked Nuria to share some of her ideas and thoughts on both Appendix B, A Perspective on Balance, pages 490 through 499, and also on Step 3, which is pages 124 through 131. After Nuria, we've got volunteers. Cale has offered to join. We also have Stacey, and when we get to the questions, we have a few other volunteers. Please, if you do have ideas that you'd like to share with others, we'd love to hear from you. So take it away, Nuria.
Okay, so yes, A Perspective on Balance, which we're pulling it from pages 490 through 499. And I'm going to actually read the first page really quickly because this is like where it comes from. You know, the idea is, okay, so the first step well, I think of the first step, like we want to get better, but we can't make ourselves better, right? And then we're powerless. And then to recover on our own. And then second step, hope. We have this hope that hopefully we can recover. Hopefully we can be restored to sanity. You know, and sanity to me is the same thing as like balance. You know, like what am I aiming for here? So it says on page 490, you know, when members of the original EDA group in Phoenix first thought about how to define recovery from an eating disorder, we initially considered abstinence as the logical equivalent of sobriety. After all, other 12-step groups had done the same thing. Why should EDA be any different? Yet when we focused on abstinence as the measure of recovery, we found ourselves sidelined by small errors in judgment as we discovered what we needed to do to get and stay free of ill thinking and behavior. This was not helpful at all. Having a negative goal, abstinence, in which people seem fixated on not binging, not purging, and not restricting just felt wrong. An abstinence is recovery mindset can be rigid and uncompromising. We decided that any definition of recovery that depended on specific ideas about food, weight, and body image meant defining the solution in terms of the symptoms of the problem. This made no sense to us. Focusing on what we didn't want drew our attention away from what we did want. And when we considered alternatives to abstinence as the hallmark of recovery, the idea of balance just felt right. And that's the thing, is like, what is this balance? You know, I want to focus on the positive, and actually we're going to talk about changing our thoughts through third step and so forth. But, you know, through the rest of this chapter, they're talking about these things that we want. Like, we want freedom from our eating disorders. We want to feel, we don't want to hurt ourselves. We don't want to hurt other people. We want to be loved. We want to love. Like, they go on to talk about things that we do want. And when we are able to be in balance on 491, it says when we are in balance, we can push a few limits yet remain safe. We can be calm yet passionate. We can be efficient yet unhurried. We can be at peace while affecting real change in the world. It's amazing what we can do when we're in balance. And so for me, when I heard of balance, I was like, oh goodness, how am I going to ever be in balance? Me, like, I never knew balance. I overdid everything, or I underdid everything. I was never good enough. And so this idea that is discussed throughout this chapter about trying to stay positive, to focus on what's right and good. You know, I had to stop focusing on all the bad things and all the negative and start trying to look at things from a different perspective, from a different view. And with me, as a result of working the steps, I learned a little bit more and more about what balance looked like. In the beginning, for me, like, trying to live in balance was like, okay, just trying to do basic things that are good for me. And, you know, they use the examples of 4 different areas that we can focus on to help guide us as to what balance might be. And they give us examples. They go into, like, you know, actually, I love the example that's used about the 4 legs of a chair, right? On page 493, it says, like the legs of a chair, as soon as any one of the areas gets weak or compromised, I am at risk of falling on my rear. You know, and so those 4 legs of the chairs are 4 areas that if we can just gain a little strength and stability as it pertains to physical aspect areas, mental and intellectual, which gets on 495, emotional, social, and then on page 497, spiritual, purpose oriented. If I can look at those 4 areas and trying to get some idea of balance, my life starts to feel more sane. I feel like I don't feel so out of whack as much, you know. And then with time, it's amazing how little by little, and I know we're going to talk about it, but, well, actually it is in there. My idea of balance in the beginning has changed drastically as to what balance is now. You know, in the beginning, I was trying to make sure I was getting a lot of those physical needs met. And, you know, I was trying to work on, like, you know, not losing my, how do I say, nice way, not being so, like, so emotional and over the top, and, you know, trying to gain some fellowship and connections with other people to help support me through this process. And as time has gone on and on, it has expanded as to what I need in order to stay in balance. And, I know we don't have a lot of time, but obviously, you know, throughout this chapter, it gives you different views on the different areas. That's all I have with that part. I don't know if anyone else wants to chime in on the chapter about balance. Uh-oh. Hello?
Yeah.
Oh.
Hi.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead, Cale.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Thank you, Nuria, for the beautiful explanation of balance and citations of the book. Those were really helpful, and I was actually going to bring up a few of the examples that you did. So without repeating you too much, I'll just share like briefly like my experience with balance, you know, and just echo everything that you said about the book, which was really good. So thank you for that. So in my experience with coming to EDA, it actually originated from me. The idea came from my therapist, who I still see today at an eating disorder treatment facility in Scottsdale, Arizona. And, you know, getting to know me early on in my recovery or in my pursuit of recovery, he recognized that I have a strong faith. And at first, he suggested that I go to AA meetings because there is such a spiritual element of the AA program, of course, and other 12-step programs like ours, finding a higher purpose. And I was actually against that idea because one of my personal problems was not, I am not an alcoholic. I had certainly abused alcohol in the past in my eating disorder, but that was not the main purpose of my problem, or the main element of my problem. And, you know, what I wanted to accomplish when I first started at this program, you know, was to find balance. I didn't know what I was looking for at the time, but I remember going to the EDA website, you know, after I expressed my concerns of not wanting to be attending AA meetings. He said, well, you could try EDA. And I said, well, that sounds more relevant. And I went to the website that day, and in bold letters, it said abstinence, or no, I'm sorry, balance, not abstinence, is our goal. And I was like, that is perfect. Because I feel like at that time in my recovery, I wasn't actually super engaged in my eating disorder behaviors, but I was probably more miserable than I had ever been in my life. And that is likely, you know, looking back at it, you know, I was at a point where I was weight restored. And so I was feeling all kinds of emotions that I wasn't feeling when I was not weight restored. And I felt like my life was completely out of balance. So just because I wasn't acting out in behaviors did not mean that I was anywhere near recovery. So I think that combined with, you know, everything that's in the book is sort of my perspective, is that balance is truly what comes, recovery is a result of balance, and balance and recovery go hand in hand. And just because you're abstaining from your behaviors, at least in my experience, doesn't really mean that you're in solid recovery. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Cal.
Thanks, Cale. So, Gisele, would you care to chime in?
This is Gisele, still in Maricopa, in full recovery. And I was just thinking, Nuria and Cale, thank you so much. Great examples. I was just thinking about when we first started this deal, and I was in AA to start with, and when we got into trying to figure out how EDA was going to work, I think we kind of fell into it because as we started with this little group of people in this room, and especially with Annette and I, we started just talking to each other and fellowshipping and laughing and being with each other, and that was huge because this is such a isolating disease. I mean, at least for me and people I know, it's very isolating. it opened up that door of those 4 elements that Nuria was talking about. Those 4 elements. And yeah, I in the beginning, I thought, you know, I just got to quit my behaviors. If I can just get a handle on my behaviors, I'll be all right. And that's not the case. But as Annette and I and several others in the room, we talked about our stuff. We laughed at each other. We laughed at ourselves. We cried. You know, the balance part just kind of fell in, because it wasn't about the food. It wasn't about the lack of food. It wasn't about that. It was about everything that in our life that we were lacking. And it was amazing how it really kind of fell into place. How the idea of balance in every area of my life. And I see, you know, I see little red flags when I'm not in balance. You know, Nuria talked about the chair, you know, with the legs. I see little red flags when I'm getting out of balance, you know, and that happens through just the journey of it. You know, I didn't notice those things until farther along in my recovery. And that's why it's so important to give yourself some time and grace in the process. And balance will come. And, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Gisele. This is Nat. And the key thing, you know, when we read about those letters of support, and there was one from Robin Cruz, and there's some things that she said in there that just really struck home. And one of them was that, you know, we find that there is peace and joy in the middle. Like, we're people of extremes, you know, a lot of intensity. Sometimes it's just like emotional drama, even if we're cool as cucumbers on the outside, you know, and the balance is where we find, you know, sort of like we stabilize ourselves like the legs of a chair by investing in our friends, investing in relationships, investing in things we trust. And we're going to talk, I mean, this step 3 is all about trust. Balance is sanity. And that takes perspective. I don't know what's sane unless I've got perspective. And I don't get perspective unless I've got step 3. And step 3 is the thing that it's like, it makes my life make sense. So we talk some about higher purpose, but we get that from reliance on something bigger than ourselves, whatever that is. We get the purpose, we get the perspective, we get that, the ability to laugh at ourselves. That's an adult. Adults laugh at themselves. You know, kids take stuff real seriously, and they need a lot of support. And when we get to this program, we sometimes don't have a lot of adult perspective on what's so stuck about us. I didn't have, you know, here I am, you know, it's like I've got kids of my own. I'm, you know, things look great on the outside, but man, on the inside, I was still a very hurt, wounded, you know, unheard child. And it took a lot to kind of, and a lot of like Gisele laughing with me at the insanity of how I responded to situations. And I didn't necessarily respond externally in any way that was weird, but man, internally, wow. So anyway, that's perspective on balance. And I really do like this chapter or this appendix, because it gives a variety of ways in which we can find joy, find the things that bring us joy, bring us back to a center. And it's a really important thing, because we forget that, you know, recovery can feel like killing snakes. It's not about killing snakes. It's about finding the things that make your heart sing. That's all we've got on balance. I don't want to, I know we're short on time. Let's move next one. So you're going to start off with you again on how it works, pages 124 to 131.
Okay, so now that we have an idea of what we're aiming for, what the goal is here, right? This balance, you know, we're going to focus on positive, you know, focus on the positive instead of the negative. And okay, I can't do this again. I'm going to try balance. Look at these different aspects. You know, step 3 is made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood God. And, you know, at this point, I had to believe that I could recover from my eating disorder, that there was hope for me, you know, and from a view of someone, well, it doesn't matter, I'm just going to say. So I had to realize, like, God didn't, I always look at it this way, like, God, this is just totally this is my opinion, my view on this is God didn't allow the creation of food or the idea of exercise for me to abuse it. Or they don't, I have to realize they exist to fuel me, to give me energy, to allow me to function and live in this world, and from, I guess, a non-secular view, my purpose in this world is not to hurt myself with these self-harming behaviors, or it's to take care of this body I'm in so that I can participate in this world that I'm in to, interact with these other human beings, right? I am to be of service. So when I'm making this decision to turn my will and my will and my life over to the care of God as we understood God, which is on 124, but then on 125, there's a different wording of step 3, made a decision to commit our will and our lives to the service of our higher power, higher purpose as we understood it. My old way has not worked. And throughout the next few pages, and obviously I can't read everything, but like the next paragraph on 125, in the middle, it just talks about how most of us have, and it's like in the middle of the sentence, but most of us spent a great deal of energy trying to make life match our expectations. We had these expectations of ourselves, of how we thought we should be and how we thought others should be. And, when we continue down the page, it talks about we should point out that we were usually quite virtuous in our efforts to manage things, like we try to make things happen. And then, the next page, it goes on to, I have like notes on the margins. It's, we applied ourselves still harder to ensure our expectations were met. I always think of like self-will run riot. Like I'm going to get what I want and I'm going to go, to every length, and it doesn't matter if I hurt myself and anybody else. And, in the middle of page 126, it talks about how we're just so set in our way, in our thinking. And, in the middle of that paragraph, it says, we tended to think our ideas were inherently right and were sometimes dismissive of other views. In retrospect, we can see how unreasonable this was. And that's like my black and white thinking. And over the next couple of pages, they use the idea of, we're trying to play God. We're trying to play the director of this world, trying to say that this is where you should be. This is where I should be. I know what's best for you, what's best for me. And like in the middle of it, I'm destroying my life. I'm doing things that are not healthy for me. And I'm hurting people in the interim, not as productive in life as I'd like to be. I feel crappy about myself. And so this way, it's not working. This trying to make, what is it? The square peg in the round hole, or whatever it is, the round hole in the square peg. Like I keep trying to make things happen that are just unrealistic, and I'm killing myself in the interim, or at least I was. And so making this decision, I can complicate the crud out of it. But my sponsor was like, okay, it's just making a decision to like try something different. Like up to this point, you've admitted like you can't make yourself get better. You hope that there's a way because you're trusting that this process that other people have followed is going to work for you. If it worked for them, you got to hope that it's going to work for you. Trust that this process is going to work. And what's this process? The rest of the steps. We gain this perspective as a result of working the different steps. We start to see things differently. We start to like the motor in us. It goes a different direction. It's not all about me. I see like where my part is in this world, how I'm a part of this world, that the world doesn't evolve around me, that I'm part of the ever-evolving world, and how can I participate in that? What can I contribute? What does God want me to do, or what is my higher purpose with all of this? And so as a result of making the decision of going on with the rest of the work, I start to find my place in this world where I belong. Or I start to see like, quote, God's will for me, what I think it is. And I say quote because I don't really ever know what it is, but I have a better idea because instead of going against those instincts of self-preservation and abusing food and exercise to hurt myself, now I'm starting to use them for their intended purpose as a result of working the steps. They're helping me to live and function instead of hurting me. So that's really it's a decision to go on and with the rest of the work, it's a decision to try a different outlook, a different purpose in this world, to try to do things according to what, if you believe in God, what you think God would want you to do instead of like the way you think things should be. And that is my experience on those pages, in my opinion as well.
Thank you, Nuria. We'll turn to Cale and then Gisele.
Great, thank you. This is Cale, still in Phoenix, still in recovery. So step 3 is actually my favorite step. All of them are great, but this one's my favorite. So like Nuria and Annette both said, the real key to step 3 is trust. To read again what the step is that when we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood God. I think in order to be able to turn your will and your life over to anything, whether it be a higher power or a higher purpose or any form of God that you, in any sort of way that you understand God, I think that you have to be able to trust that higher purpose, power, or what have you. And I think that's super powerful. And I think, in my experience, like I had mentioned previously, is that I come from a spiritual background, in Christianity, and I do not envy those who are agnostic or atheist or have different faiths. I think that honestly, like steps 2 and 3 were probably easier for me than perhaps other people, which I'm just extremely grateful for. But what I learned is that even though I have had faith my entire life, I didn't trust God enough to fully turn my will and my life over to the care of God. I had thought that I had surrendered before, just saying prayers, being baptized or whatever, surrendering my life. But I was still very earnestly trying to be in control of my life. And I wasn't trusting God to remove the eating disorder behaviors and thoughts from me. And I was certainly not thinking about how I could be of maximum service to God and the people about me. And what I really like, I'm just going to read one bit of the paragraph on page 128. It starts about halfway through that first paragraph. It says that those of us with religious convictions, as well as those without them, find that our ideas failed, not only because they were inherently soft and mushy, but because we had not relied upon them. Religious, spiritual, or neither. We were busy using our eating disorders as a crutch to get through our day-to-day existence, with no clue that a sense of purpose or duty could carry us through life's challenges instead. And that, I have it like highlighted and underlined, arrows pointing to it. That was my biggest problem, is that I had my understanding of God and I had my relationship with it, but I certainly wasn't relying on it. So, and learning to do that was really key for me. And then the last part about the third step that, I want to mention is that, perhaps it's best known for having its prayer. The third step prayer was tremendously helpful for me, and still is today. In early recovery, one of the things I struggled with a lot was just going to the grocery store. I had a fear of shopping for food in front of other people. I was afraid like everyone was looking in my basket and judging and like, oh, that's not healthy, or like, oh, that's healthy, you shouldn't be getting, like, I don't know who would actually look in my basket and judge me today, but that was where my mindset was at. And I just remember like sitting in my car before going into the grocery store and saying the third step prayer, like 2-3 times, and then saying it throughout, that difficult experience of going to the grocery store for me. And I found that it got easier. to do that. And I really trusted that if I said the third step prayer and I truly like focused and meant what I was saying, like, God, I turn my will in my life, or God, I offer myself to thee, and how it starts, you know, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. And it, you know, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but really just embracing the third step prayer and trusting it and relying on it was really key for me. And I saw that when I was able to do that, things got easier. They really did. Asking God and relying on God for help, life got easier, and I was able to do that consistently. So with that, I pass.
Thank you, Cale. Gisele?
Hi, this is Gisele, and Carol, Nuria, thank you so much. I don't know what more I could add. I guess I was looking at the step 3. Well, step 1, 2, and 3 are more like a foundation where I can't, he can. I think I'll let him, and I think I'll let him is made a decision. In step 3, made a decision, and I can do that at any time during the day. I can do that at any time during the week. I can make a decision. Just because I say it once and I do it once doesn't mean I'm done, because I screw up all the time. But I'm going to try and get out of the way. I'm going to go back to the positive attitude that Nuria was talking about. Is we have to go back to that positive attitude and say, all right, I'm going to get myself out of the way and see what's out there, you know, and it's so important to get myself out of the way. I can't fix myself with a broken thinker, and that's what these steps are meant to do, is to help us gain perspective and trust and get myself out of the way. And so, yeah, I like this step. I like this step a lot because it's a conscious decision to make that decision and get the focus off of me, because it's that selfish, self-centered stuff that I've got to get in control. Like Nuria was saying, I've got to get controlled. And this whole disease is, I don't have it. I got to get out of the way because I don't have the control. And with that, I'll pass. Thanks.
And you know what? I'm so glad. And I want to tie this in, what you talked about, Gisele, with, you know, switching it or transitioning to step 4, because on page 130, you know, it says on the first full paragraph, perhaps you doubt if you can find the strength and power to carry out the decision, right? You are being asked to make in step 3. I don't know how many times I made decisions to do things and I like never finished them, you know? And so down at the, you know, middle of that paragraph, it says, but please be assured that that's the point of steps 4 through 9, is to sweep away any barriers to your sanity and integrity so you will be able to honor your commitments. You know, I never could honor them before because I had so much stuff blocking me, and that's the purpose of steps 4 through 9. So thank you for making, you know, segueing it into that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nuria. I was going to read that if you didn't. That's so cool. So I know Stacey had volunteered to share some ideas on actually step 2, but wasn't able to make it. So Stacey, do you want to chime in on something here?
I think they covered the readings pretty well, and I won't beat a dead horse. But especially since a lot of my favorite passages have already been read. But, you know, for me, you know, between steps 2 and 3, you know, I grew up in a church, and I know that we're hearing a lot tonight seems to be really heavily, you know, faith-based, people speaking. But, you know, I grew up in that setting, but, you know, by the time I came around to the rooms, God to me was really judgmental. You know, was I willing to actually still use that belief system? And that's one of the things that I love about this program. And, you know, when I originally worked it through the AA text, you know, is that it is a God of our own understanding, or, you know, a higher purpose, higher power. You know, I was able to take out the characteristics that I saw God as having, judgmental and vindictive and all of that, because that's where I was raised. So, you know, I really like the fact that I could, you know, really come up with, you know, what I believe to be a true concept of my higher power. And second of all, you know, like was just said, You know, I had a hard time in the beginning continuing to turn my will over to that conception. You know, yes, I believe it, but do I really want to choose that instead of acting out? Do I want to, you know, do I want to pray before I eat so that I don't act out, so I don't eat too much, too little, or whatever? You know, it was that constant decision that I had to learn to make, was turning my will over. And that was probably the hardest for me, but the most rewarding.
Thank you, Stacey. It sounds like one message is persistence, and it's really true. I wanted to point out a couple things that on page 127, it does talk about, and this is Annette, sorry, fully recovered from an eating disorder, as it discusses in chapters 3 and 4, full recovery from an eating disorder requires a complete emotional displacement and rearrangement, a transformation as profound as any known to human experience. This isn't easy for anyone. Heck no, it's not. And if you're an atheist or an agnostic being asked to turn your will and your life over to something you can't see, or, you know, it's holy crap, that's hard. So what I came to the realization is that, you know, just like Cale had read, that, you know, it's really about reliance, this idea of relying on things. And I couldn't come up with the version of God that I really trusted. So I had to look, what did I trust? And I had to make up something that was bigger than me, that had more power, and I cared about more than anything. And, you know, some of those basic principles were moral principles, just like they talk about in the AA text, that they didn't save me. But when I got right down to it, as it says on page 127, the AA text tells us people of faith have a logical idea of what life is all about, and that we might have observed that spiritually minded persons of all races, colors, and creeds were demonstrating a degree of stability, happiness, and usefulness, which we should have sought for ourselves. And as it continues on that page, it says, well, yeah, that's true. And we're happy to add that many atheists and agnostics are also quietly living lives of sane and useful purpose. They too have a logical idea of what life is all about, and are demonstrating a degree of stability, usefulness, and happiness we ought now see for ourselves. And it's true. The thing that really differentiates us is our ability to put something big in ourselves ahead of our daily drama. And that's what it says really throughout this chapter. And it's not easy to do for anybody. I don't care if you're a person of faith or no faith. It's just really hard. But this idea that there's something that can give our lives meaning and purpose, you can call it a spiritual idea, you can call it, you know, a reliance on God, but you don't have to.
Uh-oh. Hello?
Hello?
Uh-oh, did we lose Annette?
I think we totally lost Annette. She'll probably call right back in.
I'll text her just in case she's still talking.
Okay, thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to say quickly, guys. I'll mute in a second, but I was at a crying baby. I missed a lot of the stuff that you guys said, but I listened to what I could. So now with that, I'll mute back and keep listening.
Thank you. Sorry, I've got a connection problem here. Yeah, I'm back. So sorry. But the point is, it's hard for everybody, regardless if you're a person of faith or no faith. Reliance on this idea of something bigger than yourself is really tough. And, you know, it's a continual process. Gisele mentioned, we've all heard from the folks on the phone. It's hard. I'm going to wrap it up at this point with step 3, and we're going to now take questions. We've got a series of questions that folks have written in with, and I would so love to hear from, I know we've got several people who have volunteered to answer question 1. We're just going to take these in order, and we're going to hold the answers to just about a couple minutes apiece, so for each one of the questions. So I know Cale's answer to question 1 is pretty quick, so we're just going to read them off. First question, and this is for the panel. Now our panelists include Nuria, Cale, Gisele, Stacey, Leslie, Diana, Ellen, Michelle, and Ange. It seems like the stories we've heard so far from people who are told by doctors that they had to recover or die. This might or might not have changed their minds about how serious their situation was, but I'm just a garden variety overeater. I'll be honest, I don't think overeating is a mental illness. It sounds like this program isn't really for me at all. I'm disappointed, frustrated. How can I do step 2 or 3 believing that I can be restored to sanity if I don't think overeating or even compulsive overeating is really insane? I think I know why I overeat. Maybe my behavior isn't the most rational thing in the world, but it doesn't meet the criteria for mental illness. So now I really do feel hopeless. How do I work steps 2 and 3? Cale, you said you had a quick answer? Cale?
Did I get unmuted?
Yeah, you're unmuted now. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Had a mute problem. Yeah, so how to work, it cut out a little bit. So it's basically how to work steps 2 and 3, right, without like a defined definition of a higher power. Is that right?
Yeah.
I only heard the last part. Okay.
It's more like if you're not really sure that you're insane, it's really hard to be restored to sanity, right?
Yeah, and
Okay, that's the part.
without having a diagnosable eating disorder.
Perfect. Yeah. So thank you for that. Yeah, I cut out a little bit. So for me, I always just think about the cliche definition that Einstein gave, I think it was him, that the definition of insanity is doing the same things over and over again and expecting a different result. And so, I mean, in my experience, that was very true for me, is that, you know, I didn't particularly feel like I was like insane, but I was definitely engaging in the same behaviors and being dumbfounded as to why I felt like death, why, you know, getting sort of doom and gloom. But I mean, you know, in the book, it talks so much about us like being, you know, on the outside, very well-functioning adults and contributors to society. I think contributors to society. And I think that really reflects what it looked like for me. But at the end of the day, what I was engaging in was insanity, and it was not balance, which we talked a little bit about at the beginning of this meeting, is, you know, what balance is, and that is shifting your perspective. You know, having a healthy relationship with food, for example. You know, not obsessing. You know, I think it's really helpful to let go of, you know, preconceived ideas of what insanity is, and recognize that we all have an ability to improve, and all could, you know, sometimes benefit from a change in perspective. And I know that I certainly did. So.
Thank you. Anybody else want to address the question about, hey, yeah. Thank you, Cale. Anybody else want to address the question of, hey, we just don't really think that this doesn't feel like insanity to me. How do I work these steps?
Hi, this is Diana, and I want to address that question.
Go ahead, Diana.
I think there's, or I'll just speak from my experience, like coming into this program, I still struggle with, and I don't know if it's like the voice of my eating disorder, the voice of whatever that voice is. There's like a sense of like, do I belong here? Do I deserve to be here? Were my symptoms significant enough to be here? And I think there's some denial that comes with eating disorders in general that a lot of us can struggle with. So we don't even realize how severe it is, even if it is severe. And along with that, what helps me convince myself that I can be here and I can work this program for myself is is just working step one and being able to identify my powerlessness and unmanageability in whatever way that looks like. And I really needed to stop comparing it to other people around me, because if I just looked at how my life became unmanageable, and I lost a lot of things that I wanted in life due to just obsessing over food, weight, and body image. And I wanted to get those things back. And it didn't matter if I was as bad off as other people I saw, or what my idea of an eating disorder looked like. I just knew that in step one, I could admit that I was powerless and unmanageable over what condition I was struggling with at the moment. And I was willing to take the next step to find some kind of solution over that. And that's really all I needed for myself, because this program really is about me trying to get better from whatever it is. And that's really all I had to share about that.
Diana, Cale, thank you both so much for contributing to that question. We're going to move on to question 2, because I know it rolls on. Anyway, so the second question was, I'm having a lot of trouble reconciling myself with the secular ideas in the EDA text. I know we don't all get here full of faith in God. Even I was a little hard-hearted toward God when I got here, but the very heart of 12-step recovery, learning to rely on the one who has all power, and that one is God. I completely agree with the letter from the person of faith in chapter 4. The 12 steps are sacred to me. My relationship with God is everything to me, and I sincerely hope my sponsees get that message. I don't want my message to be diluted by a talk about a higher purpose. I just don't understand how there can be a higher purpose without God. What do I tell my sponsees who are disturbed by secular people who want to do things their own way? That's the question.
I would love to speak to this if that's possible. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Ange.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Ange.
Yes, go ahead.
So when I'm also I'm a Christian, and when I was starting to read through, especially in the big book of EDA, I remember really thinking to myself, wow, there's a lot of mention in here about higher purpose. And like, I'm used to reading the AA big book, and I just was like, what is the big deal? And I was getting all huffy about it. And then my sponsor said to me at the time, she said, like, this needs to be in here because not everybody has the belief in God, or like a religious, or even some people are even afraid to say a power greater than them. And this program needs to be open and available to anybody, so that anyone at any level can get recovery and won't be left because they can't seem to, because they don't believe in whichever way, right? And yeah, it really helped me understand that, because like it says in the literature, like our recovery is not rigid, right? And so our thinking around this to me also needs to be open-minded so that others can participate.
Thank you, Angela. It was helpful. I really appreciated hearing your perspective. Anyone else want to chime in on that one?
Yeah, this is Cale. I don't know if Gisele will want to chime in, but I have to say one of the most moving parts of my recovery, or like significance, was reading Gisele's story of hope, which I know that we read, I think, in first or second week. And one of the things that she wrote in her story is how she learned to let God out of the box. And for me, like I had mentioned before, you know, I came into the program as a Christian, and I still am today. My faith is only strengthened through this program. And it's because I let go of the, you know, the ways that I had previously thought of God as, like, you know, judgmental, which was mentioned earlier, for example. And, you know, I believe, you know, that God or a higher power, it can mean different things to so many different people, so many different things. But none of us are necessarily right or wrong. And the key is to, like Gisele said, to let God out of the box. And then the last thing, I'll mention is one thing that really helped me is actually in the AA book. It's on page 133, but it says that we are sure God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. So like whatever that looks like a power or an entity or a being, you know, think of, it really helped me so much to think of it in as simple as God just wants me to be happy, joyous, and free. He's not judgmental. He doesn't, you know, it's not about what I eat, don't eat, exercise, or, you know, whatever. It's God truly wants me to be happy, joyous, and free. And whatever that looks like to you, I think can be life-changing. But the key, like Gisele says, is to let God out of the box. So that's all I've got to add.
Thank you, Cale. We're going to move on to the next question. This is question 3. I was interested in this program because it seemed like a more reasonable approach to addressing eating issues generally, but I guess I hadn't expected the steps to be so God-focused. I'm not at all comfortable with all this God talk. I was abused not just by God-inspired people, but by the community's idea that I should rely on God to absolve me and my abusers of all our transgressions. Frankly, it makes my skin crawl every time I hear the word God. I don't believe in God, don't want to believe in God. I'm an atheist by choice, and I'm completely comfortable with that. I know you say you support atheists and agnostics in EDA, but God is in every other sentence in the book and half the steps. Seriously, I don't see the support for people like me in any 12-step program. Can atheists use a version of the steps that at least takes the word God out? I want to help address this problem. I don't think I'm alone. And I sometimes wonder, okay, so how am I supposed to do this? Sometimes I think I know what to do. Other times I really don't get it. Can you please explain exactly how I'm supposed to take this higher purpose and make it into something that's a...
Uh-oh.
Oh no.
Hey, it's Michelle. I know this question. Yeah, I was asked to share on it. So it's how am I supposed to take this higher purpose and make it into something that's a power greater than myself? So that's how the question ends.
Yeah.
And so my experience on this is just that, and I actually put a timer on because I really identify with the reader. I have a very strange past, but I had, was a very, very devout kid, and then like stuff happened, and after it went more badly than it could have gone, I made the decision I was never telling the truth again, and that, I was going to seek escape in whatever way I could. And that kind of started me on a certain path. And I was able to find recovery from another issue through another 12-step program. And again, like was really, really devout, like found that place again. And then 10 years into that, I woke up one morning and my connection was gone. Like my connection to everything was gone. And it wasn't that, hey, I just woke up and didn't believe in God anymore or whatever. I woke up and felt like my heart had been ripped out of me. It was really, really painful. And but I had two things going for me. I knew, one, that I was honestly where I was, that I was just in this place and it was part of my journey and I could accept that. And two, that I had some experience knowing that if I took certain actions, that I would recover. And so I became willing to do what I did regardless of what I thought or felt. And at the time, and I believe taking actions with a sponsor is really important, to walking through the steps with somebody. And at the time, I had a sponsor who was like kind of evangelical, and she would say stuff to me and I would want to punch her through the phone. And she was just being honest with me, but she had what I wanted, you know what I mean? And I would call her every week. I was just doing a deal and walking through this incredibly painful experience, knowing that I was taking the actions that I needed to for my recovery. And so for me, that's shifted a little bit, and I don't need to go into the whole big story, but for me, no matter what I need to do what I need to do for my recovery. And there's nothing anyone's going to say to me that's going to keep me away from a meeting, that's going to keep me away from doing what I need to do for my recovery. And all I can say is if somebody like me can recover, anybody can. I mean, I just can't, emphasize that enough. And that was my timer, but I do want to talk to the second thing, which was, to me, a higher power is a higher power, right?
and that's a power greater than myself. To me, a higher purpose serves the same kind of function, I think, is what I read in the literature, that a higher purpose can be something through which I derive strength and direction and guidance. So it's not all about me. It's not all about me running the show. It's just like a compass to point me in a direction that's not imploding on myself. And that's all I'll say on it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
And I actually wanted to bring up Roger C's letter of support, which is Roman numeral, I think it's considered 48. In the letters of support at the bottom of that page, it says, Bill Wilson had no problem with secular versions of the steps. Bill Wilson is the co-founder of AA, where the 12 steps came from. When presented with one rewritten by Buddhists, which replaced the word God with good, he wrote, to some of us, the idea of substituting good for God in the 12 steps will seem like a watering down of AA's message. We must remember that AA steps are suggestions only. A belief in them as they stand is not at all a requirement for membership among us. This liberty has made AA available to thousands who never would have tried at all had we insisted on the 12 steps just as written. So God, higher power, higher purpose, good, Christian God, non-Christian, it doesn't matter. You use the word that works for you.
And it's Michelle again. I would say if I needed to go through the big book and scratch out the word God, I would.
Yeah.
If it was that much of an impediment to me, I would do it. And that's all.
That's right.
Thank you, Michelle. And I just wanted to make it clear that, don't let if you're somebody that doesn't really seek a spiritual solution, you somehow found yourself in this spiritual program like me, then, don't let that word that, makes your skin crawl or whatever. And I know that that idea is abhorrent to people of faith, and I'm sorry, but the word doesn't need to be an impediment. Don't let it stop you, okay? The idea is that, we're not really broken. There's pieces of us that are kind of stuck in time that we need to get unstuck. That's what that fundamental transformation that this program helps us experience really is about. It's about being able to build tolerance and resilience and find ways to seek joy and fulfillment in our relationships with everything in the world. And that it doesn't have to be spiritual. It can be, and it should, I think for most people it is. And that's wonderful. And that's something we celebrate in EDA, is like whatever that thing that brings you wholeness and peace and sanity is something we celebrate regardless of how we get there. It is really truly something that that I really experience as something that is rational, right, and good. And for me to find something that I could trust, it had to be something outside that was bigger than me, that was really about humanity and how can I better serve that idea. I had to take care of me so I could really show up reliably. I had to use this idea that being of service, as much as I didn't like that idea, because I was afraid I'd be the hole in the donut. Where would I be? I'd be lost. Not at all. Our emotions, those things that I was so scared of, those things are authentically me. By using the tools of this program, I've learned that these emotions are useful. They're just tools that I can use to put myself on the firing line of life, that these are there for a reason, and I'm to use them to try and make the world around me a little bit less awful or better, or just let my realization of what is really already there, good, right, and perfect as it is. My job is to align myself with what is and figure out how to use my time, talent, and energy to be of some useful purpose. And that's what step 3 is all about. So with that, we're going to go ahead and turn to page 131. And I know we're running out of time, so we're going to spend our remaining minute here going through. Now, I think those of you who have been listening on this, I want to hear from you guys. Are you guys ready to take this important decision? We made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Because if so, we are ready to take our third step prayer and alternate commitment. So, you guys ready?
You ready?
Yes.
Ready?
Yay. All right. So on page 131, those who wish, please, you may kneel. We're going to read both the original form of the third step prayer and the alternative to the third step, which is the third step commitment. All right. So all together now. God,
God,
I offer myself to thee, to build with me, and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help, of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. And the commitment, I am now willing to commit myself to serving the greater good and be of cheerful service to those around me. I'm willing to make my service to a higher purpose more important than any desire for recognition or reward. When filled with fear and self-doubt, sure to be at times, I resolve to remember my willingness to do the next right thing that prepares me to be of better service. I gratefully embrace this opportunity to turn my will and my life over to serve a useful purpose. Hallelujah. We got step 3 done. Yay. Yay. Thank you, everybody. And our assignments for next week, we're going to start step 4. Oh boy, the fearful step. But before we do, many EDA sponsors introduce step 10 as a way to diminish fear and resistance surrounding step 4. So we're going to talk about step 10 next week, as well as step 4. So step 10 readings, which is kind of like a mini step 4. Step 10 readings include pages 186 to 192 and 517 to 521. Also, those are workshop worksheets, pages 32 and 33. The step 4 readings are in chapter 5, pages 132 to 158, and Appendix D, pages 526 through 543. I'm looking forward to talking to folks next week. If you'd like to participate on a panel or you've got questions on anything we've heard so far, please write in to info@eatingdisordersanonymous.org. We'll be thrilled to take your questions and put them before a panel, and I'm thrilled to have everybody on the call. Thank you all so much for helping us out and helping those who will follow after. Really appreciate talking to you all. Take care. Have a wonderful week.
Yeah, there's